G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and a fantastic start to your week. Now, if you haven't yet, I do recommend coming and joining the Telegram group. Of course, I post there what I can't post on here. Now, so many spaces across the internet and Telegram and YouTube are heavily censored by moderators. Now, my Telegram is not. There's only been a few people ever banned. You'll never be banned on how you feel about a subject, only if it's like directly abusing other people. But it is a really good space to get differing opinions and differing experience and knowledge bases on certain things that happen. So come and join. But of course, today, like always, we do have a lot to speak about. So we'll speak about Mali cutting diplomatic ties with Ukraine. We need to talk about, of course, the F-16s. We know that the F-16s have been in Ukraine for a few days, maybe a week, but today it is actually confirmed. We need to look at some satellite imagery. We'll look at some losses and recruitment. But where I want to start is actually at the maps, because we got a second map update yesterday that came out between uploading the video and then going live on YouTube. So we'll take a look at that and we'll look at what has changed, as well as then today's map update as well. So here we are on the map, of course, Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Now, let's roll back one day and you'll just see here in the corner, you'll get 4th and then number 1 and number 2. Now, at the time I filmed, we only had the first one. We didn't have the second one. So let's switch on then the 24 hours timeline thing here. And anything in red check is ground made then over the past 24 hours. Blue check will be Ukrainian, red check will be Russian. So we'll come down here into then the Avdiivka front. Now let's go to what we looked at then yesterday. So we saw this just pushing down towards the Vovcha River, and then we step up to the second map update of the day, and we see some ground to the north of Prohez filling in, as well as a further push just to the west of earlier in the day. So we see this first there and then there. So pushing down to then the east of Zeleny, and then let's push forward then to today, and we see a further expansion around Ivanivka and Serhivka Zeleny regions. What we're calling on this then the sausage maneuver, where you try, push down, and then further expand. And this is what we are seeing through these territories out from the west of Avdiivka over the past weeks and months here, with territory being made then daily. Let's switch this on and look at what then the Suryak map is showing in this region. Now, out from Prohez, near Zeleny, these regions, as well as what we saw out from Novoselivskaya Persha, this is looking as movements in the same amount of area. So we can see Ivanivka is this red dot, this is Zeleny, Novoselivskaya Persha, and down. So what we're seeing as far as movement and where areas are pushed by the Russian forces here, we can confirm that those areas, that is where it is shifting, as multiple maps are showing the same thing. Now, what we need to do is just roll back again a few days and look at what changes we've seen. So the first map update, we had nothing in here. The second one, we did see then just some movement in grey zone. And then up to today, we see a fill-in around this Pevcheny region in what I'm calling the New York front, but the Toretsk front in here. So further pushing there. We'll line this up with then Suryak. Now here's showing some movements in similar directions. So again, even if it's not, bang on, we know if one map mode shows a grey zone movement or red zone movement, the other one's confirming it. There's been some amount, even if it's in a somewhat different area. Suryak is showing, look at this bend in the road. He's showing it's way down in here, but he's also showing just this area here is filled in, and showing on previous maps up near Pevnevsky that this has been filled in as well. So we can confirm that there is further movement on this front line. So where we need to come is into Bakhmut, as there has been some interesting shifts in here over the past few days. Now, when we spoke about yesterday, I said this was a very important movement because it's the first, at least on this map, of showing a crossing of the waterway that splits Chasiv Yar from the micro-district from Chasiv Yar itself. Now we skip forward into the later map that day, and what we see is that was pushed back, but further expansion up to then the water crossing was made, as well as that Russia is pushing then on a separate axis. They'd given up on here and pushing in a separate location. And then we step to today, and they've pushed all of the area here then up to where this waterway makes the divide. Now, Noel also reports on this, the failed attempt, and then this new current attempt, which is then backed up by this map. So it is interesting to see what is happening here. Again, I don't yet have a Syriac map update. We'll pick up out of Bakhmut and we'll head down to the south into Krasnohorivka, where we have seen some shifts over the past few weeks, but no shift today or the last couple of days. But then we see then this on the Syriac map. Now, let's compare the two. So this push out not only to the north, but now showing a push to the west. This westerly push is not shown across this map, but a lot of Krasnohorivka has come under Russian control. This is where we first saw then the turtle tanks come into play. But I want to talk about something here, as well as the momentum that we're seeing Russia not only continue, but seemingly accelerate in some fronts as well. And this is getting noticed by Ukrainian pages. Noah report says, in the Avdiivka-Pokrovsk direction, no specific changes, but the situation is really very difficult for Ukrainian troops. Russians have considerable superiority in infantry and air reinforcement. The real question is how Ukraine can turn this tide, because Russians have momentum. And he shows on his map some area made around New York, as well as the areas we spoke about out of Avdiivka. And this is the question being asked, is not only how Ukraine can stop these Russian advancements, to halt them in areas, but needs to completely turn the tide to have then their own offensive actions. And we haven't seen the mass mobilizations that Ukraine would need to do to make then the latter of that, I guess, a possibility of the mobilization or recruitment of hundreds of thousands. And he does say the superiority in infantry in numbers and air reinforcement, specifically with those FABs. And will the F-16s we talk about in a few minutes be able to stop those FABs coming in? And this leads into something else that I want to speak about in the infantry numbers and the losses and the recruitment that Russia is having of soldiers. So we've always seen that these are the numbers that are getting thrown around, and we've always posed question to these. You know, we're talking 583,000, well over 1,000 days, and this will always be either eliminated or liquidated, which that is alluding to KIA, not KIA plus WA plus MIA. No, that is alluding to killed. And of course, what people will point to, well, if there's, let's sort 600,000, then your wounded is going to be something like 2 million. And I have stated before that the amount of footage and losses and deaths we see, if it was that high, would be huge. And I do bring into question if Russia could maintain losses of that nature for this long. It would be unbelievable to try and actually backfill this. But one of Ukraine's most prominent journalists, well over 1 million followers on Twitter, then put this on his Twitter, talking about ordinary Russians. Now, we're not going to speak about this part of it right now, but I want to allude to some of the numbers that he does here. And this was posted only yesterday. About 120 ordinary Russians have been killed in this war to exterminate Ukraine, which is unprecedented since World War II. This war sees no end in sight. Up to 25,000 ordinary Russians are joining the Russian military every month, and we'll talk about the recruitment of this. By the end of 24, another wave of mass mobilization. But this is some interesting parts here. This guy, Ukrainian, very prominent journalist, and he's saying 120,000, which is significantly different from this number here. But this is the number that I have spoken is probably more realistic in this. And I'll go over that. I'll talk about the recruitment of Russia recruiting 25,000 a month and why a mobilization may not actually be coming. So this is from the Ministry of Defence UK, where there's a war happening as well currently. The average daily Russian casualties killed and wounded has fallen over the past month to a conflict high of 1,200 to 1,124. So more similar to these numbers here, where we have said this may include everyone, but it is acting as if it is just KIA. So there is some, I guess, discrepancy there. Then we go into Media Zona and BBC, where they look at these recorded names. So they go through publicly available sources, social media, news reports, announcements, regional authorities, and they say the list isn't exhaustive, but they go that it may probably be more in this 120,000 numbers, what their approximation is overall. And of course, that can take into a lot of other accounts in this as well of missing in action. And that is something that I've spoken about. Both Russia and Ukraine have large payouts. Ukraine is an incredibly large payout for killed in action. And that there may be incentive to mark down as missing rather than killed when money could be tight, or to show the operability of units. And also we need to talk about, it's a large battlefield, and with modern weapon systems, as much as I hate to say this, bodies can just get completely obliterated. But let's break down how I at least see this number, that we have 60,000 Russians confirmed killed. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if double this, so another 60,000, are missing in action. Like I spoke about, large payouts, maybe incentive to put down as MIA, and modern systems and losing people at the front into areas of grey zone, no man's land. So let's sit around that 120,000. Let's say it's times 3 of this are wounded. We end up at about 360,000 WI, and that brings us to a total of 480,000, with, of course, there's going to be a hell of a lot of variance in these numbers. But over 892 days of war, that means we're at 136 KIA, or missing in action, a day. And then of the total number, we end up with 538 across the KIA, MIA, wounded in action. And like I've said here, that these numbers seem a lot more reasonable for the footage that we have. If 1,200 or over that died every day, every single day, the footage that we would see, I believe, would look like the ambush on Wagner and local Mali forces every single day. That is a massive, massive number, because you need to account for that you're going to have then at least 3 times of that in wounded. So then you're going to have 3, 4, 5, 6,000 wounded a day. And I don't know if any system in the world, whether it's American, Chinese, or Russian, or anyone's, could actually keep up with that amount of losses day on day on day with recruitment. Now, what then Ilya says here as well, he speaks about the 25,000 are joining and another wave of mass mobilization. Now, 25,000 joining, you're not going to need this mass mobilization. And what we have spoken about, I think 3 or 4 videos ago, was through Russian pages that there's rumors of demobilizing soldiers. And we've spoken about why could this then be? Why could there be demobilization? Well, the reason is if your recruitment is then overtaking this. Now, I was actually sent then photographs of some recruitment then posters that are then around Russia, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation of Contract Service. So recruiting not being mobilized. So let's have a look at this further down. 30 to 45,000 rubles per month, so about 530 USD. Now, this is incorrectly translated, but 195,000 ruble one-time payment. So if you sign up for, a minimum of a year, so about 2,300 USD. 100,000 then in a regional cash payment, which is about 1,180 USD. 170 to 200,000 rubles per month if you're actually in what they call the zone of the special military operation. So you're in Ukraine in the war. So that then is, of course, $2,350 a month. And of course, this is then going to be on top of your base salary. So this is coming up to a lot of money. We know that Russia are paying for destruction of equipment. This is going from 50,000 to 1 million rubles. So say an F-16 is going to be at that probably million mark. This is that a maximum of 1 million is 11,000. Then this is 8,000 rubles for participation in active offensive operations. So about 94 USD a day. For those interested in what we call that, I guess, danger pay. Ours, when I was in, was, and of course, much, much different. I'm not trying to compare this, but ours was 150 a day. So that's about 90 USD, I believe. I'll put that on the screen. And for each kilometre of advance of your assault troop, so if you're in a storm unit, of $588 for the advance. Now, this is a lot of money for anyone on here. And this, when we contrast to the median monthly income in Russia is between $500 and $520. These are large numbers, and of course will incentivize people to join. People that say money is not an incentive have never been a young man looking at the job market, especially if you're sanctioned to shit. So you can see how that may be backfilling a lot of those roles. Now, people may go, oh, that's not that much money, but what we do need to look at is, of course, the PPP, the purchasing price parity of a country like Russia compared to most of my listeners are in the US, Australia, or Europe. And of course, I think this is the best way to explain purchase price parity is how much is your dollar or your ruble actually worth, and it's always in comparison to USD, but how much can you buy for the same amount of money? And this is the McDonald's Big Mac Index. So in Russia, the equivalent is $2.62. In Australia is $4.47. In America, $4.62. So dollar for dollar is not equal on the country. And I've always said that a lot of Eastern Europe tends to be, I believe, about a third the price of Australia. Taking into account Australia is incredibly bloody expensive. But what this is meaning is don't look at salary in a country of, when one country has a median of 20 grand and one has one of 60, your purchasing power can actually be very similar. So what I'm getting at is that's a lot of money for anyone. That's an exceptional amount of money in Russia. Now, some will point that this is desperacy to try and recruit more. That could be there, but also to try and demobilize due to how unpopular demobilization is to try and recruit guys. And if you are recruited, typically you'll have a better morale and willingness to train, and we'll see if that translates then into the fight. As well, what we need to look at is when we speak of those losses, one thing we need to then take into account is Zelensky in February said that 30,000 Ukrainians had died in war. Soldiers. So, of course, that was in February, so it is a while back. But then we need to look at then the populations, and this starts telling us a part of a different story. Russia in 2024 is close enough to 144 million. Ukraine's population is of about 38 million, but you can see a decrease over then the years. Now, we are going to speak of this in another video about the population and issues that will have massively coming into the future, but also look at how countries can rebound with a lot of children after wars. But then we have a look at a similar website that then they track Ukrainian losses sitting, and this is the number we need to look at, not these ones because these are total, but at about 52,000. So how sustainable is the losses? People saying Russia is running out of guys. What I'm just trying to present is there's a lot of variation between who is saying what about the numbers and this idea of running out of men. And when we look at the populations, the willingness to mobilize, the willingness to recruit may tell a vastly different story to the narrative being perpetrated all over. Therefore, this could be the reason why we're not only seeing movements made on the front, but seemingly then an acceleration of those movements on the front line by the Russian forces. So we have a few photographs, updated photographs of this ammo dump in Morozovsk in Russia at the airfield that got hit by the drone. So this was then before, and this is then after that this has been completely destroyed. Now, there are some pages claiming that a Su-34 was taken out there. As you know, with me, with any airframe claims, I don't care who it is. If it's an F-16 or an F-34 to fucking the Wright brothers plane, I need a photograph of it, minimum of that. I'm not believing shit until I see it. So let's talk about the F-16s. And this is the biggest news of the day of these F-16s coming in. How much effect will it actually have on the war? Well, time will tell us, but I think people also need to be realistic about how this is actually going to be. But Zelensky, he has posted up, as well as all the official Ukrainian accounts, about the new aviation standard of Western combat aviation and to the need to close the sky from Russian missiles for the combat results that bring our victory closer. And this time they have balaclavas on. The pilots will be manning these aircraft. Again, the amount of aircraft we believe is about 6, but confirmation that the F-16 has come into play. So like I've said, the clock has now started ticking on seeing what changes these can bring, and I think so much is riding on these planes. Now, what we also need to talk about is the equipment we've seen on these planes and where we've seen them flying. So this one is flying over Odessa. Now, what I will say is I believe Ukraine will make, one, it's impossible to hide something like this, but secondly, they'll be making a heap of flights like this over Lviv, over Odessa, over areas as a show of force to the populations there too, as we do know that there is a growing, I guess, motivation to the war issue as well. Now, 2.5 years on as well, people seeing the map move. And we see this, of course, in then the recruitment and people hiding to be mobilised. So you can't say that there isn't a problem amongst the population there of the continuation of the war as well. So I think for a morale boost, we'll see a lot of these flights overhead here too. Now, of course, these F-16, so much is riding on it, as well as it takes a hell of a long time to train pilots. And this guy's put up this. Now, this guy, he has pulled so much of just out of his ass before. So the grain of salt with this is bloody, would have its own fucking gravitational pull. But he has said Ukraine International Legion is recruiting F-16 pilots and ground crew that freedom calls. Now, this is something that I spoke about when F-16s were first announced, that the way I would do it and the way you could have done it today was recruitment of foreign F-16 pilots, not only from America, but all the countries that involve F-16s. Now, speaking of the money we spoke before, well, that is what would attract people. And what I spoke about at the time was F-16s are insanely expensive. Training pilots is insanely expensive and timely. That you could do this far faster if you put out big money to try and recruit pilots to come and fly one of these bloody things. And I was saying at the time, I was like, just put it at $100,000 a month. Massive. Put it at $10,000 a mission, $20,000 a mission. And people called that ridiculous. But what I don't think they took into account is how expensive it is to train pilots. The experience, even though then of those pilots, that they've got 18 months of training where that is significantly shortened compared to pilots you may recruit who have decades of flying these, as well as the cost of a plane. If you lose one, even if you can save one plane not going down or being able to fly a mission, that if a plane goes down, you've already, if you don't have a plane go down, you've saved millions. But if a plane can then hit $1 billion system, then you've had a huge effect on target and the salary is then covered. That's how I said to do this. If it was me doing it, it would just be $250,000 a month for crew to come in and maybe then trickle that down. But I think overall cost could actually then, I don't know, I don't think that is as ridiculous as people said that it was at the time. But there are some interesting things on these planes. We need to look at the helmets and some pods. So let's look at the helmet. So in the video released, you can see this bloke then wearing this helmet here. That this is the joint helmet mounted cueing system, which provides a high off-bore targeting of the AIM-9X. So where you're looking can target rather than having to be in your HUD, and a major increase in situational awareness for the use of the AIM-9 and AIM-120. Now the AIM-9, these have a lot of variants, but can fire within 1 kilometre to about 35 kilometres, depending on variants. And the AIM-120 is about 160 kilometres of engagement range. Couple of things on the AIM-9 and AIM-120 is these are used in other systems as well, namely NASAMs. This is AIM-9X firing out of a NASAM as well, and then they can fire the AMRAAM, which is the AIM-120. Now, we do know that ammunition for air defense has been a problem, so it's going to have to be between now the F-16 and then the NASAM systems as well. I don't know what fix there's going to be on that for those systems, but what I've said that I believe that these planes will be used most in an air defense role. Therefore, the effect on the front line, on the tactical movements, will be very small, if any, for an amount of time. That it'll be more trying to stop those Russian strategic weapons hitting things like energy systems or into cities or well behind the line. But those suggesting, I've seen major YouTubers suggest close air support of these with like the main gun, that is just ridiculous for the amount of time. So it will be interesting to see how those engage things like cruise missiles, or if they are able to engage planes long range. We've also seen these pods on here underneath the wings that are bolted on. Of course, you can see then a sidewinder on here. Now, what are these pods? Well, on this plane, we see 4 AIM-9s and this tumour self-protection pod. So this is a countermeasure for systems in the air. This is the pod here with these like infrared on it. So let's talk about this. The F-16s for now are equipped with the Pylon Integrated Dispensing System, the PIDS Plus systems, which may include Advanced Electronic Combat Integrated Pylon System, both of which made by Tumour in Denmark. These are bolt-on self-defense systems that include missile approach warning sensors and that provide near spherical coverage for spotting incoming missile threats, as well as additional expendables, so flare and chaff. They also provide radar warning and homing receiver capabilities, giving crews high situational awareness of radar-based threats. This is an incredibly challenging environment, the most challenging environment that fighter aircraft will ever enter, and any countermeasure is going to be absolutely needed. It'll be very interesting to see how these perform. It doesn't have dispensers of this EKIPS Plus, but does have Northrop Grumman's capable electronic warfare suite. So I'm not exactly sure if this system is what we are seeing, but it will be very interesting to see. So you can have both on board on a different wing from my reading on these. Again, things like if you look up like an F-18 Growler, that is what we see as a full suite of like an electronic warfare fighter aircraft. So it will be very interesting to see how these perform, but I have spoken about how these have been built up versus the short-term effect on the front line. I think we could see a disappointment amongst a lot of people, and the guys I speak to have spoken about that there is disappointment from some of the troops because they're saying you're spending billions on this, that we may not see any change on our positions, but we can't get a new thermal site that we are needed, and we're having to fall back daily due to things like this. Now, Fighter Bomber has had a response to this. Now the hysteria will pass, the crest will suck out the maximum media effect from this event, and the cast iron arse of reality will come. For now, all the hysteria is expected. In the near future, it will become clear when the crests have the F-16s, and the hunt will begin for both planes and airfields. So saying that Russia's going to hunt the airfield and then planes. In principle, it has already begun. The hunting season is declared open. What we have seen is Russia has been for about 4 months hitting an area in the west that there is an airbase there, I believe trying to damage the runway getting made, because we know new runways are going to have to go in for F-16s. It seems like they were trying again and again to hit that. We have no idea on the success of those hits. If the photos from the network are reliable, then the AIM-120D was either not given to the Ukrainians or they were given but are hiding them. They gave the 120C, which has a real range of about 70 kilometres. I can't confirm or deny that. I don't know enough. In general, in any case, we prepare for the worst situation possible for us. And yes, we need a quick goal. The arrogance will immediately diminish. There are tons of people who want to kill them. So the pilots, of course, if you were a Russian pilot, that would be a big bloody hit if you can. What we've spoken about with these ranges of the 160Ks, the 70Ks, with the FABs are a really difficult bloody thing, because let's just take for an example, let's just take Vovchansk for an example. If the Russian bombers can fire full range of a FAB, some 40, that's a good guess, some 40 kilometres behind the line, they're going to come in, drop this, and then fuck off again at Mach fuck. How long is this aircraft actually going to be in area of targeting? Even if these are right up then against the border, which we know these are not going to be actually against. So for let's just go 150 Ks, that you're going to have ability to hit these both on the in leg and then the leaving leg as well. But you remember, these are flying incredibly quick in this two pieces, one way and the other. This is where these are going to need to be hit, and we see with the FABs trying to give them a little bit of extra boost with a small engine to try and get them further and further to get them out of zones to be hit. Now, I've seen numbers between 60 and 90 seconds that the Su-34s will actually be in area that is interceptable by these, but of course, if you can see them, likely they can see you. And we have spoken about Russian pages speaking to a change of tactics, flying Su-34 with then air superiority fighters with air-to-air missiles aboard as well to protect from then these bombers going down. And that is, and I'll say it again, I believe these F-16s, that is what they need to change. Hitting the strategic missiles, yes, that's a big thing, but they need to hit these bombers, dropping the FABs that are having a massive, massive effect on the front line. So Mali has cut all diplomatic ties with Ukraine immediately over comments by Ukraine's spokesperson of the GUR in the north that killed Malayan soldiers and Wagner fighters. We reported on this the other day. Now, then Yusuf has said the rebels received all necessary information they needed, and not just information, which allowed them to conduct successful military operation against Russian perpetrators of war crimes. We're not going into details now. You will see more of this in the future. So not only saying that we had some involvement, but there's going to be more involvement. Now, of course, one thing we spoke about in this, not only did Wagner PMC guys get killed, but also Mali soldiers. Now, this is some more that has come out. Mali announced on Sunday is cutting off diplomatic relations. The transitional government of the Republic of Mali has learned with deep shock the subversive attacks by Mr. Andriy Yusov. The spokesman of the Ukrainian military intelligence agency had admitted Ukraine's involvement in cowardly, treacherous, barbaric attack by armed terrorist groups, which resulted in the deaths of elements of the Malayan defense and security forces of, I won't try and pronounce this, as well as material damage. So he's not happy at all then about this, and saying he openly, unequivocally displayed the country's support for international terrorism, particularly in Mali. This is what he is saying. We'll speak about coup in a second, because of course Mali, the transitional government, was done by a coup. Not the only country involved here who has had a coup previously. Maga said Ukrainian officials have done worse by announcing that there are more results to come. These are serious accusations which have not been denied, show Ukrainian government's official support for terrorism in Africa, in the Sahel, and more specifically in Mali. Either remarks of Yusuf and this gentleman constitute acts of terrorism and apology for terrorism. The Malian government has therefore decided to break off diplomatic relations immediately, and necessary measures to prevent any destabilisation of Mali from African states, in particularly from Ukrainian embassies in the sub-region, by terrorists disguised as diplomats. Mali considers support for Ukraine as support for international terrorism and aggression, which part of the broader pattern of certain actors who actively support instrumentalized terrorist groups in the region. So there is a lot in this, and people will go, is Mali important? Now, economically, I mean, outwardly to Russia, Ukraine, the West, no, not particularly. But geopolitically, yeah, absolutely it can, especially with Ukraine currently trying to gain the global south and the West trying to regain influence in Africa, as Russia's influence there then, of course, grows. Now, of course, Mali is in the Sahel Alliance, which has then grown. So this is the area here that we're speaking about between Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad, all countries of which we see a hell of a lot of terrorist groups pop up, local rebels as well. So it is very, very difficult to get a grasp on exactly everything happening in here. And 3 West African countries run by military juntas, so they'll form a joint alliance. So this is what we have spoken about. Groups linked to IS, Al-Q guys, no one who's bloody good here. Mutual Defence Pact of Alliance of Sahel States. Violence of the West Africa Sahel region has worsened in recent years. It is really, really shocking in there. Now, we have seen as well, this came out a couple of days ago, I want to say about 3 days ago, I screenshot it thinking, I reckon I'll talk about this at some point, and well, I've got an area to talk about it. Ukrainian Special Services have explored strategic cooperation with Tuareg soldiers, a rebel commander told Le Monde. We have links with Ukrainians, but we just have with everyone else, the French, Americans, and others. And like I've said, just because someone's holding a Ukrainian flag does not mean that they're Ukrainian. You can hold up any flag. That's how intelligence operations may work around the world. I wouldn't know. Yusuf did not provide details regarding the nature of the collaboration, but according to Le Monde source, some rebels received training from Ukrainian forces on how to fly drones. This is something we have seen in areas like Sudan as well, and drones around the world scare me everywhere because they're so simple, so cheap, that so many groups will then have their hands on these. And I've said Australia lost 41 guys in Afghanistan. If we went back in now and drones are in play, we'd lose 400 and something, and our freedom of movement would be nothing. That we talk about this government coup in 2021, and this is the transitional government then spoken about. And as people in this should know, coups, of course, can occur. Now, if I was the leader of the world, if I was a US president, what would I do in Africa? Well, of course, there's a lot of other decisions I would then make around the world, but I would get a coalition of the US, of NATO, of Australia. Australia's not in NATO, by the way. A lot of people, including guys I know in the army, think we are. We're not in NATO. Russia, China, India, all the major players, everyone. I'd get everyone involved and going, right, We're lining up just abreast, 10 layers deep. We're going to march fucking north to south of Africa, and anyone who's IS is just getting eliminated, because IS is just make the other terror groups seem like fucking pussies. They're unbelievable, and try and cut off the head of then groups like that have such a hold in areas like this. Try and just clear that out abreast, and then be like, right, you've got your sovereignty, this, that. Let's try and make this work. Rather than, we're funding this, and Wagner's in there pulling out gold and oil, and the French are doing this, the English are doing this, Ukraine's doing this, and Russia's using Wagner to support an SVR operation in this country to try and destabilize. None of that shit works. Line up everyone abreast. Right, we need to get rid of the terrorist groups that are here and try and restabilize the area. But of course, no one will ever do that, because while it's destabilized, shit is very, very cheap and can be used. Never mention that. Legends, longer than it should have been today, but look after yourself. Have a fantastic Monday. If you'd like to support me, the links are down below. But otherwise, have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.